In this video, I would like to share with you how I do an I-cord casting on in the round without the cast on jog. I will use a short circular needle, a contrasting colored yarn, and this is the main yarn. I take the contrasting colored yarn and cast on 3 stitches. I will use a long tail cast on method, but it doesn't really matter. It can be any casting on method. 1, 2, and 3. Now I take another tip of my circular needle and move the stitches knitwise onto the left needle tip. One, 2, and 3. Now the working yarn is on the left. I will knit 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And again, return them knitwise onto the left needle tip, like this. The working yarn is on the left. Again, knit 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And return them knitwise onto the left needle tip. Again, the working yarn is on the left. Knit 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. I think this is a convenient length of the I-cord for my purpose, and I'm going to cut the working yarn, leaving about 4 or 5 inches. Now I'm going to switch to the main colored yarn. And before I do that, I need to again move my stitches onto the left needle tip, knitwise, like this. 1, 2, 3. And keep them snug. And I'm ready to join in the main colored yarn, but instead of leaving a short tail, I'm going to leave a long enough tail, about 25 centimeters or 10 inches, because I will use this tail to connect my work in the circle. I take my work and join the new yarn. This is the ball of new yarn, and this is the yarn tail, the very long yarn tail. I will need 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And keep everything snug again. So these are 3 regular knit stitches. Again, like before, I return them knitwise onto the left needle tip. Make sure my stitches are snug. And now I'm ready to start casting on in the main color. The working yarn is on the left, and this yarn tail is loose, so to make it more comfortable, I will wrap it around my finger like this, so it's a little bit tighter. I will knit a stitch and then knit into the stitch second time through the back loop. Like this. And then knit the second stitch in a regular way, and the third stitch in a regular way. And I can release the yarn tail. Next, I will move knitwise 3 stitches onto the left needle tip. The working yarn is on the left. Again, I will knit twice into the first stitch. First, the usual way, from left to right, and second time through the back of the stitch. Knit the second stitch, and knit the third stitch. Again, return 3 stitches knitwise onto the left needle tip. Working yarn is on the left. And repeat. Knit the first stitch and then knit this stitch through the back loop second time, knit the second stitch in a regular way and the third stitch in a regular way. Here you can see how the I-cord edge continues to grow from right to left. And these are the cast-on stitches I will use to continue knitting. And so I continue. Knit through the front and through the back loop of the first stitch, and then the second knit stitch is a regular stitch and the third knit stitch is a regular knit stitch. And again, return 3 stitches knitwise onto the left needle tip, working yarn on the left, knit the first stitch twice, knit a regular stitch and another regular stitch. Again, return 3 stitches knitwise onto the left needle tip, yarn on the left, the first stitch knit twice, and the second stitch is a regular knit stitch and the third stitch is a regular knit stitch. Slip 3 stitches knitwise onto the left needle tip, the first stitch through the front and through the back loop, followed by a regular knit stitch and another regular knit stitch. And I will continue until I knit a desired length. One more thing I would like to do before I continue is to shorten the yarn tails of my waist yarn. Maybe leave just a couple of inches. It will keep them out of the way and it will make it easier to remove this piece later on. I finished casting on the I-cord. This is the provisional part that will be removed. This is the yarn tail and the working yarn on the right. Next, I take the yarn tail and thread it on a tapestry needle. Now I take the end with the provisional part and slightly pull it down. And I need to find this stitch below the stitch on the needle. And I will insert my tapestry needle under the left leg of this stitch and pull the yarn tail through. This will secure this stitch because otherwise it will be harder to find it later. Next step is removing the provisional part. I'm turning the work around, and this is the leftover of the working yarn of the provisional part, and I simply gently pull this yarn tail out to free the stitches. And that's it. And slightly tighten the yarn tail like this. Now I take the right hand needle tip with the working yarn, and I will slip the last 2 stitches off the right needle tip, and also undo these 2 last stitches. Leaving the double stitch on the right needle tip. Now is the time to check that our casting on row is not twisted, that the I cord is facing inside the circle. And we are ready to connect the 2 ends. For convenience, I pull out the needle tips a bit, just a couple of inches on both sides, and place them facing each other like this, with the needle tip of the yarn tail on top. This is the yarn tail. It's on the right. And the end of the row with the working yarn is on the left, with the working yarn out of the way behind the work. First, I will align this stitch where the yarn tail comes from with the stitches on the left. I will insert the tapestry needle under the loop at the base of the first stitch, and back to front into the following stitch. And pull the yarn tail through. And now I'm returning into the first stitch where the yarn tail came out, front to back, and back to front into the next stitch. And pull the yarn tail through. And here I check that the first stitch is of approximately the same size as the stitches around. Now I'm going second time into this stitch, front to back, and back to front into the next stitch, like this. Back to front, this one, and front to back, that one. And pull the yarn tail through. And check that the stitch is of a good size. Again, second time, front to back into the stitch on the right needle, and back to front into the next stitch. And pull the yarn tail through. And check the size of the stitch so it looks nice and neat. And the last movement, front to back into the first stitch and under the loop at the base of the stitch on the needle. And pull the yarn tail through. Check the size of the resulting stitch. Looks good and finished. That's it. So this is it. As you can see, we have an absolutely perfect alignment of all 3 stitches of the I-cord. And the connection is absolutely jogless. And we have a nice and smooth 3-stitch I-cord edge with a perfect connection in a circle. Smooth and continuous alignment of stitches on both sides. The working yarn at the back is in a position to continue the knitting. I'll knit a few stitches and show how the area looks again. This is the beginning of the row on the right side. And this is how it looks on the wrong side. So the I chord looks continuous and jogless. And there is no gap between the stitches. And here I needed a little bit more. This is the working yarn. And this area is the beginning of the row. That's our yarn tail. And you can probably notice that the beginning of the row is here. That's the beginning of the spiral knitting, or knitting in the round. But the I chord looks uninterrupted. That's the beginning of the row on the other side. So this is our jogless I chord casting on in the round. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.